Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we have an interesting scenario to go through for the 2026 governor elections. And this video is going to be focusing on what I think the Democrats is their best realistic scenario for the 2026 governor elections. Now, don't worry, I do plan on doing another video as well for the Republicans' best case scenario, so that should be coming out in a few days as well. But this video is going to be focusing on what I think the Democrats' best case is for the 26 governor map. So starting out, there are a handful of governor's races that, based on recent election results in the governor elections from 2022, 2018, and from the presidential election of 2024, we have a pretty strong indicator of how these races are going to go. And I'll start first for the states that I view as safe for the Democrats in this scenario. A lot of these states are going to be safe already just based on how the election is currently going. California is certainly going to be a safe state. Safe meaning more than 15% margin of victory. Fully expect California will be that state. Oregon, though it was very competitive back in 2022, there was a third-party candidate getting around 9% of the vote. Assuming we don't see that again in this scenario, I think Oregon would be more than a 15% margin of victory for the Democrat Tina Kotek. Now we have the state of Colorado, where this is going to be an open race, with Jared Polis not being able to run for a third term, though U.S. Senator Michael Bennet is running for this race. And again, I think in this scenario, given how Colorado has trended over the past few election cycles, I think we see Colorado end up going safe Democratic in this scenario. Now we can move to the state of Illinois. Illinois, though it did vote under 15% in the 2022 governor's race and under 15 points in the 2024 presidential race, in a Democratic best case scenario where the midterm environment is more resembling of 2018, J.B. Pritzker, if he runs for a third term, should win the Illinois governor's race by at least 15% of the vote. Then we have the state of Maryland with Democratic Governor Wes Moore. Again, the only real scenario where he could face a challenging election here would be against Republican former Governor Larry Hogan. Wes Moore certainly capable of winning by more than 15% in the Democrats' best case scenario. Now we move to the Northeast, where we have the state of Rhode Island. Though the Democratic governor, the early polling has shown he's actually not too popular and is open to a potential primary challenge. But Rhode Island is a very Democratic state at the general election level. Rhode Island should be more than 15 points for the Democrats. Maura Healey in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is one of the most Democratic voting states in the United States from 2024 and the 2022 governor's race. Fully expect Massachusetts will be over 15% margin of victory when everything is said and done. Now, these are all states I fully expect will be 15% margin of victory or more in 2026, pretty much regardless. We also have some interesting states to talk about that I think could go over 15 points, but are sort of right around the precipice of doing so. The first state in New England is going to be the state of Connecticut. Connecticut voted just a bit shy of 15 points in 2024 in the presidential level, and the governor's races in Connecticut are usually more competitive than the presidential races. It was about a 13-point win for Ned Lamont, the Democratic governor, back in 2022. A lot of uncertainty in this race if Lamont's going to run for a third term or not. He is eligible to do so, but I think in the best case scenario, Democrats could certainly win this race by more than 15% of the vote. Pennsylvania will also be very interesting because Josh Shapiro just won here by 14.8% against Doug Mastriano in 2022, so only about 0.2% away from breaking 15%. Now, Shapiro does hold very strong approval ratings in the state of Pennsylvania, or the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The question will be, though, can Republican candidate Stacey Garrity do a better job than Doug Mastriano did? I personally think that she will, and this will be under 15% of the vote. But in the Democrats' best case scenario, it is at very least possible that Shapiro could break 15% of the vote, but certainly on a much less scale than we see out of like Massachusetts or Connecticut or Rhode Island. For now, I'm putting it just barely in likely Democratic, but that is basically a 15-point win. Now, another state that's very interesting is the state of Vermont, because this is Republican Governor Phil Scott. He is very much a very liberal Republican, frequently critiques President Trump, and is very well liked by the very Democratic state of Vermont. Every election he has been in for a while now, he has won by a very large margin. Going back to 2018 was the last time he did not win by more than 15 points, and that was albeit very, very narrowly. 2016, he won by about 8.7 points. 2014, the Democrat Shumlin defeated the other Republican Milne by 1.3%. So for some reason, the liberal Republicans running in Vermont are able to do very well in the state when the Democrats have such a stranglehold on Vermont when it comes to the presidential and governor elections. So if for some reason Phil Scott decided not to run for re-election in 2026, I actually think Vermont would start out in the likely Democratic category due to the fact that Vermont at the governor level just seems to be a lot more competitive than it is at the presidential level. But still, if Scott did not win, the Democrats would certainly be in for a very big possible flip. Now we have the state of Maine. In the Northeast, this is currently held by Democrat Janet Mills. She recently won the state by 13.2% in 2022 against former Governor Paul LePage. This is going to be an open race, though, as she is term limited. Maine has had a very lengthy history of being a likely Democratic state now across the presidential and governor elections. The Senate level with Susan Collins and Angus King, it's a little bit more complicated, but in the Democrats' best case scenario, I think we'd expect Maine to be at least in the likely Democratic category without really too much of a competition there. But in reality, we'll have to wait and see how that one goes. In the state of New York, this is Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul. She looks like to be facing off against Republican Elise Stefanik. Now, this was a close race back in 2022, with Kathy Hochul winning by 6.4% against Lee Zeldin. Still, 6.4% would be considered a likely Democratic win. And I think in the Democrats' best case scenario, Kathy Hochul could easily break 10% margin of victory, but I do think it remains under 15. It would be a likely Democratic win. That puts the Democrats up to 12. Republicans thus far still have not assigned any races yet. That will be changing very soon, though. I just realized I also missed the state of Hawaii. That will definitely be a safe Democratic win, without a doubt, over 15%. Now, another state that I think would start out in the likely Democratic column would be the state of New Mexico. New Mexico, back in 2022, voted for Democrat Governor Grisham by 6.4%. This will be an open race, as Grisham is term limited, though New Mexico being likely Democratic in 2022. President, also Democratic, likely Democratic at 6 points. We're more likely than not going to see the state go likely Democratic for the Dems in 2026. The question will be in the margin, and the Democrats' best case scenario, an over 10-point win, is certainly very possible. Now, the last Democratic state that I think for sure is going to be likely Democratic is the state of Minnesota. Minnesota, this is Governor Tim Walz, famously being the vice presidential running mate for Kamala Harris back in 2024. He won in 2022 by 7.7% against the Republican Scott Jensen. Now, I do believe Jensen is running again, so we may see a rematch of Walz versus Jensen. I don't believe Walz has officially said he's running, but my guess would be that he would run. And if he did, we could see a rematch of Walz versus Jensen, where Walz could win by more than 5 points, under 15, putting Minnesota as likely Democratic. And I think at this point so far, this is all relatively pretty reasonable for what the Democrats could actually do in 2026. Now, there are a handful of Republican states that there are governor elections that are up that I really don't think the Democrats have any chance at actually winning. So don't think this is going to be a Democrats just win every single governor's race video. Even in their best case scenario, there are still a lot of states Republicans are going to win. These states are Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska. Now that Dan Osborne is running for Senate, not governor, this will be a safe win. Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, and I would throw South Carolina and Florida in there in the likely Republican category, just being a bit shy of that margin under 15%. But I think we see South Carolina and Florida remain red pretty much no matter what. Now, Texas Democrats, I'm sure, would love to try and contest, especially in their best case scenario. But I think with Greg Abbott running for another term, or this will be his fourth or his fifth term, he has shown an ability to win very competitive elections in the state of Texas, last winning by 10.9%. Even in the Democrats' best case scenario, where everything kind of goes their way, I still think we see Greg Abbott hold on and win by at least 5% in the Lone Star State. That would get the Republicans up to 11 governor's races. Now we're getting into some states that could actually potentially be competitive. I'll start with the state of New Hampshire. This is Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte. She just got elected in 2024. She defeated the Democrat Joyce Craig here by about 9 points. So that was a likely Democratic win. Now, Republicans seem to do, especially Chris Sununu and Kelly Ayotte, do very well at the governor level in the state of New Hampshire, much better than Republicans do federally in New Hampshire, the Senate and presidential and House level. So I don't think Kelly Ayotte's going to lose his governor's race, even in the Democrats' best case scenario. But in the Democrats, if they had a big enough wave election, I do think it at very least is possible Ayotte could win by just a bit under 5%. But I do think she would hold on and win that governor's race, even in the Democrats' best case scenario. So that is the state of New Hampshire. Now the state of Alaska, because Alaska is a very fascinating state. Alaska right now, this is Republican Governor Mike Dunleavy. He is term limited and cannot run again. And this race is very wide open. There are a lot of Republicans running, including the Lieutenant Governor, Nancy Dahlstrom. You also have potential U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski maybe running for this race. The Democrats, Tom Begich, the former minority leader of the Alaska Senate and uncle of U.S. Representative Nick Begich, is running in this race. Former U.S. Representative Mary Peltola is also listed as a potential candidate, though it seems to be more indications that she may be running for Senate rather than running for governor. This race right now is currently listed as solid for the Republicans, or likely for the Republicans, but the hypothetical polling where Peltola runs shows a real possibility that the Democrat could actually win this governor's race. So it really depends on which Democrat it ends up being, because when you look at the recent election history in the state of Alaska, there actually is some potential for this race for it being very competitive. 2022, Dunleavy won by a safe margin. 2018, Dunleavy won by 7 points. Back in 2014, the independent Bill Walker defeated the Republican Parnell by 2.2%. 2010, it went for the Republican Parnell by 21 points. Back in 2006, it was Republican for Sarah Palin by only about 7.4. So Alaska has shown at very least a willingness to be a little bit competitive. I think in this scenario, for the Democrats' best case scenario, Mary Peltola would have to narrowly decide to run for governor instead of running for Senate. And in that case scenario, Peltola would win this race by a lean Democratic margin in between a 5 and 1%. It is possible she could win by more than that in the general election, even maybe bumping it up to likely Democrat, but I think she would have to win by probably a lean margin. Now, that being said, if Peltola were not the Democratic candidate, I think we would still see the Republicans probably hold on to this race by under 5 points. But for the sake of this video, we'll say Peltola ultimately runs and wins this race in the lean Democratic column. It's not really so much so about a detriment on the Republicans, as much so as Mary Peltola is such a strong, unique candidate for the state of Alaska. Now, we can move on to some other states where the Democrats are going to look to contest. And some of these are going to be very familiar states in terms of the competitive election states for 2024, starting with the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin, this is going to be Democratic Governor Tony Evers. He is not running for re-election, so it is an open race in the 2026 election cycle, but this is going to be one of the closest watched states in the entire country. The Lieutenant Governor, Sarah Rodriguez, is running. Lots of other Democrats have expressed interest in running, including Mandela Barnes, David Crowley, Francesca Hahn, Cavalier Johnson, Kelda Royce, and several other Democrats, including the Attorney General Josh Kaul, are listed as potential candidates. This is going to be one of the closest races in the entire country to watch. The Republicans also wide open at this current point in time for who could be running. It's going to be a toss-up without a doubt. The recent election history at the governor level, though, Tony Evers won in 2022 by 3.4%, and in 2018 defeated Scott Walker by 1.1%. This at the same time where we saw President Trump win the state by under 1 point in 2024, and Biden win the state by under 1 in 2020. Trump won the state by under 1 in 2016. So I think even in the Democrats' best case scenario, we're going to see a competitive election in the state of Wisconsin. But I do think for now, it does start out in the Democrat scenario as lean for the Democrats. Now, this is probably where it starts out anyway, but I think it's going to be very close, but the Democrats, certainly in their best case, could win this race. Now we move on to the state of Michigan, where Michigan, this is going to be an open race as well. Gretchen Whitmer is term limited, and this is a very fascinating race due to the fact that independent Mayor Mike Duggan of Detroit is running for governor, and he seems to be taking a good amount of votes away from both the Democrats and the Republicans in the early polling, where right now, despite it being listed as a toss-up, the Democrat seems to be leading the Republican by about 1 to 5 points or so, where independent Duggan is taking about 22-21% of the vote. This is going to be a very close, fascinating race to watch for. In the Democrats' best case scenario, I again think it falls under 5%, but I think due to the vote splitting mainly, but I do think we could see the Democrats winning in Michigan without a doubt. So that puts the Democrats up to 18. Now we're getting to some states that are also very competitive in the 2024 election, starting with the state of Georgia. Georgia, this is going to be an open race as Brian Kemp cannot run again due to being term limited. Chris Carr and Burt Jones are both running on the Republican side. Democrats still have a little bit of unclarity on who's going to be their nominee. Stacey Abrams, the former nominee from 2022 and 2018, have expressed interest in running. Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former mayor of Atlanta, is running in this race. This is going to be a very close competitive race as well. Toss-up from Cook Politico. Inside Elections has it as tilt Republican as well. Now, one thing that's going on with this race that's going to be very interesting to watch, though Brian Kemp won it by 7.5 points in 2022, he only won it against Abrams by 1.4% in 2018. And we could see a similar midterm election environment in this scenario to 2018 and 2026. It should be worth noting at the Senate level, the two Democratic senators, Raphael Warnock, won by lean Democratic margins in 2022, and Ossoff won by 1.2%, Warnock 2.1% in 2020. We also saw in 2020 Joe Biden win the state by 0.24%. Trump won it by 2.2% in 2024. So I think for the Democrats' best case scenario, I think the Democrats could win this governor's race, and they could do so by a lean Democratic margin. Again, I don't think we're going to see more than a 5% victory, though. Even in the best case scenarios, I think Georgia is going to be very close. But Democrats certainly could win the state of Georgia. Now the state of Arizona. This is going to be Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs running for re-election. She'll be facing off against either Republican Andy Biggs or Karen Taylor Robson. And this is a situation where this is going to be a close race, but electability questions that hurt Kari Lake in 2022 could potentially aid Katie Hobbs in this race against maybe Andy Biggs or Karen Taylor Robson as well. The early polling, though it shows to be a toss-up race, has had Katie Hobbs leading over Andy Biggs and Karen Taylor Robson from anywhere from about 2 to 3%, depending on the poll that you're looking at. So for Arizona right now, based on the early results, this race already starts out in the lean Democratic category, and I think that's where I would ultimately end up finishing in the Democrats' best case scenario. This has the Democrats up to 20 governor's races, Republicans up to 12. With one more state that in the Democrats' best case scenario, I'm very confident the Democrats could win. That would be the state of Nevada, where this is a Republican incumbent governor, Joe Lombardo, who just in 2022 defeated Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak to win this race. Now, Attorney General of the state of Nevada, Aaron Ford, is running on the Democratic side, and the former governor, Steve Sisolak, has also expressed interest in potentially running again. Though Aaron Ford already has the endorsement of the two Democratic senators of Nevada, Jackie Rosen and Catherine Cortez Masto, and 3 U.S. representatives in Stephen Horsford, Susie Lee, and Dina Titus. So it seems in the Democratic primary, unless Sisolak jumps in, that Ford probably has this locked up. Now, this race, despite being very close, is listed as being a slight advantage for the Republicans. And we did also just see, worth noting, obviously in 2024, President Trump won the state by about 3 points over Kamala Harris. At the governor level in 2022, Lombardo won against Sisolak by 1.5%. But I do think Nevada is still a very close competitive state that in the Democrats' best case scenario, the Democrats could narrowly win by more than 1 point, but under 5 points. And a large reason being could be the situations happening in Las Vegas now, where there are business reports that Vegas is having problems with tourism and money and such, and that could potentially hurt with unemployment, and that may give the Democrats a potential opening in that race. In the Democrats' best case scenario, they could pull out a narrow victory in Nevada. Now, we have 3 governor's races remaining. 3 of them are in states that President Trump won by pretty large margins in 2024. But Kansas is a state currently held by a Democratic governor in Laura Kelly, who she won back in 2022 for re-election by about 2.2% against the Republican Schmidt. 2018, she won by a much larger margin, about 5 points, against the Republican Chris Kobach with a lot of third-party vote after a very unpopular Republican governor administration in the state of Kansas. So Kansas, I can't officially rule out and say this is an automatic Republican flip in the Democrats' best case scenario because the governor of Kansas has won it 2 terms in a row now. At the same time, I'd be very shocked, even in the Democrats' best case scenario, if the Democrats were able to hold on to the Kansas governor's race. But one of the Democratic candidates in this race already has the endorsement of the governor in the Democratic primary. This is Ethan Corson, the state senator, has the endorsement of Governor Laura Kelly. So this could become a very competitive race if ultimately everything goes the Democrats' way, like it did back in 2018, where maybe the Democrats could eke out a under 1% margin of victory in the state of Kansas. Now, this is going to be a very big if, as Kansas is still a pretty red state, despite having a Democratic governor, but I think this is one that certainly could happen and kind of shock everyone like it did back in 2018. Now, for the Democrats, in Iowa and Ohio, this is going to be a little bit of a different story because these states are probably equally as red to Kansas in terms of presidential levels, but when it comes to the governor levels, this is going to be probably a little bit more favored for the Republicans. Iowa, Rob Sand is one of the best Democratic candidates the Democrats have fielded for the governor elections in 2026, while at the same time, also worth noting that Iowa is still probably a pretty reliable red state. Democrats would love to win Iowa in this election scenario. And maybe it's possible when everything is said and done that they could. But I still think right now, in the best case scenario for Democrats, Iowa, at worst for the Republicans, would be about a 1-point victory. I don't think, without Kim Reynolds in this race, the Democrats are going to be able to win the governor's race in Iowa. But at very least, it will be competitive in the Democrats' best case scenario. Now for the state of Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy, he could be facing off against either U.S. Representative Tim Ryan or potentially Democrat Amy Acton. I think we see Sherrod Brown announced he is running for Senate in Ohio. So that is certainly a major, I would say, bullet dodge for the Republicans and Vivek in Ohio. Ohio also being a likely Republican state, I think we see it stay Republican for Vivek versus Tim Ryan, but I think we see it remain in between 1% and 5%, even in the Democrats' best case scenario. So in the best case scenario I can come up with for the Democrats, I have them winning about 22 governor's races, Republicans winning about 14, with some very close calls in Kansas, Iowa, and Ohio as potential pickup opportunities for the Democrats as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you did, leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts, and I hope to see you in a future video.